We started off this conference on Monday speaking about Africa and AI, and right from the beginning on Monday, we've had some questions about how do we bring new talent into the data science space? How do we make companies more inclusive? And what do companies look for and looking for new talent? And my aim for today is really to talk you through a case study of Amuzi and what we're doing to grow young talent in the tech and data science space. This is by no means the only way to do it or the right answer, but we like to share with you some of the things that have worked for us and some of the challenges that remain in this area. I think the context is very clear to everybody here. There's a growing demand in industry for more trained individuals. Number 2 on the list of obstacles that data science report in doing data science is finding talent, right after getting clean data. So clearly there's a need for talent, particularly people who are ready to do the work. And we all know, besides just having the talent, also the need for more inclusivity within the space. Tech particularly is still quite underrepresented in terms of minority groups and genders. And this can lead to all kinds of biases. If we think about the sampling biases, the heuristic biases that we as humans can affect on our models and our data. And the hope is that having a more diverse team can really help prevent those kinds of problems. Yet despite this massive industry demand, millions of talented young people in South Africa are not reaching their potential. I think the stats from the last quarter of last year were that 54% of youth are unemployed in South Africa. Over half. 54% of people are unemployed, and yet we're not finding the correct talent. Traditionally, companies have hired from universities, and although that is certainly one way to do it, I'm going to argue that that is not the only solution, and that can't be the solution for broad combating of unemployment. 48% of university students do not complete their degree. Black students are at the highest disadvantage and highest risk here. 32% of black students do not finish their degrees. And companies complain at the end that graduates are often not work ready and have to go through often as much as a year-long training program to get the actual skills that they need on the job. So clearly university education is not the only way to do it. But the question then is, how can we develop underserved individuals? People who are non-grads, who come from under-resourced areas. There's been a lot of talk about it, but it is, without question, a challenging area, especially in a very high skilled area, such as data science and machine learning. So how can we go about it? I think there are several pitfalls. Firstly, which I'll talk about in terms of selecting people and then also training them, and then in sending people out into the workplace. So I'll cover what we do in our training, how we recruit people, and then also managing expectations in terms of companies. So at Amuzi, we are a nonprofit company, and we offer 12-month learnerships to youth, so people between the ages of 18 and 35 years. And particularly in the areas of technology, which I think is most relevant to this audience, full stack web dev, data science, and more recently data engineering. Our strategy department has started off as experience designing, but is moving increasingly into a data analytics role. And then on the creative side, where we started. So these are the different content areas that we cover. And we'll talk about how the training is done in the moment, but I think one of the key areas first that companies struggle with is recruitment. So how do we select the best people? And really, we go through quite an intensive process. We have about 13,000 people in our platform that engage with us predominantly over social media and go through stages of online learning on programs such as Free Code Camp and Data Camp, online aptitude assessment, as well as personality assessment. Then they come in for interviews and boot camp, which is the final stage of the selection, where we give them real tasks to do and we assess people's individual and team performance. And then we have about 125 current recruits in our program, in that one-year program, and just over 370 alumni so far. A full 4 on data science so far. We are the youngest of the departments and just started mid-last year. So really a lot of employers use that university qualification not so much for the skills that it brings, but just as a stamp of approval that this person has the skills, has the grit and the perseverance to complete a program, is smart enough to be able to do the things, rather than the particular skills that they're looking for. So if we go outside of the university space, how do we assess that then? And what we have chosen to do there is a combination of automated online processes. So they start off where they have to complete online courses and an online Google short course. Firstly, to get some extra skills, because we don't require any previous programming or statistics skills to get into the data science course. So they come in with some skills, but really also to see, are people willing to put in the time and the effort? Do they have the motivation to continue with us? And then secondly, they do a series of aptitude tests. So we feel that it's not about prior knowledge, but really about someone's innate aptitude for the task. And those things that we feel are important there are logical reasoning skills, so non-verbal intelligence essentially, basic literacy and numeracy, programmatic or sequencing skills, so being able to think in a programmatic way, having good problem-solving skills, statistical skills, particularly important for data science, and then a series of personality tests. And there, what we feel is important is that in the world of data, of tech, really what you're going to be doing, especially with such a short program, is learning all the time. You're never going to stop learning, so you need to be good at self-directed learning. So things like resilience, being able to complete tasks despite facing obstacles is very important. Grit, again, that perseverance is very important, both for self-directed learning and once you're out of the organization and into a workplace where it's a less supportive environment, that you can still carry on your own. Other skills that we look for are conscientiousness, emotional stability, and imagination or intellect. So these are people that we want, people who ask questions, who are driven to learn, who will show up on time, who we know that we'll be able to place into a workspace at the end of the day. So who have the necessary work professionalism skills as well. So this we select firstly through the online tests. This makes it much easier for us to automate, and so we can do this at scale without managers having to individually look at all of those people. Of those best applicants, we'll then invite them in for interviews and a week of practical boot camps, where again we look at on-the-spot problem solving. So now there's no one to help you. Can you solve a task? And we'll give them some new information. For example, we'll say, this is how you do matrix multiplication. Here's an example. Please give us the answer. Or how would you code this problem? You can do it in pseudocode or just talk us through the logic. Applicants don't need previous programming experience, but can they structure that out and know the logic of how they would put that into code? And then finally, how well do they work together in a team and present those findings at the end? To be able to see those communication skills and to see whether they are a right fit for us for the year and also for companies when they go to companies in 9 months' time. So really, these are the skills that we think are very important in the recruitment stage where it's easy to find pitfalls. Someone needs the aptitude and interest in that particular area, and they need the work professionalism and motivation to be able to do it. After the selection, they come into our program, which is 12 months long, of which 9 months is at Tamuzi and 3 months is at a partner company. So basically an internship for 3 months. They start off doing a technical crash course, which is an NIC level 5 systems development certificate. But really the real work is on our own content, and then in the last few months in working in an actual product team with other recruits of different levels and within different departments to get some real work experience. And we want to expose people to all aspects of the data science life cycle. Depending on the stream, they might get exposure to some areas more than others, but really being able to extract data from different sources, whether those are databases, whether it's from the internet public sources, or from your traditional kind of text files, being able to clean and transform the data, set up and manage databases, and then finally build the models to be able to predict and build suitable user interfaces for that as well. We're really interested in teaching people the fundamentals of that. So what we cover in our program is the basics of programming. So starting from day one, we start with the introduction to Linux and bash scripting, version control, then some basic programming principles such as object-oriented programming, test-driven development, and then they really start with getting data, cleaning it, transforming it, being able to wrangle data, being able to visualize it, and provide summary statistics, whether in reports or in dashboards, for example, and then the basics of machine learning. So covering their classification from regression models, the tree-based models, clustering. We don't, even though I'm speaking at a deep learning conference, cover neural networks, which was our decision really, because in 9 months' time, we wanted to focus on the most important skills to really be able to interpret and understand what you're doing. And I feel like someone can always go on and learn other skills, but they must be able to understand why you're doing and at what stage. They need to understand concepts such as overfitting, training, how to diagnose problems, how to clean data. And we feel like this set of skills will set them up for further learning within the workspace. That's the kind of content that we cover, and I'll provide the link to our GitHub account later if you're interested in our curriculum. And throughout all of this, we embed them into a human-centered design process. So the first month that they start with us, it's all about designing for the user. It's no use to build models if you deliver it in the end of the day in a format that the user won't be able to use. Or you end up delivering something that is not of interest to the product owner. And so they're exposed to design thinking, and they work in an agile way with Scrum methodology right from the start. I think this is also a great way if people are learning on their own to keep people motivated. So we'll start off with sprint planning for the week, and we'll check in each day what people's progress are, what the obstacles are, and assign one of the either more senior recruits or one of the facilitators to them if they then get stuck, so that there's continual process or improvement there. Once they get onto the product teams, this also becomes much more formalized, because then we can assign specific tasks to people in a team and track that those deadlines are being met and continually improve on our performance. And the recruits get an idea of what it's like working in a team, so that they know what to expect in the workplace right from the beginning when they start. An example of some of the projects that they're working on For example, one of our first recruits, Johan Kanye, in collaboration with the CSIR's Data Science for Decision Making and Decision Enablement Program, worked on classifying or looking at electricity from smart meters and being able to classify smart meter usage for planning for electricity consumption, whether this is a normal user or a business user, and to be able to recognize credit buying and electricity consumption patterns in the data so that they can predict fraud and anomalous measurements that might arise from broken meters or attempted fraud such as tampering with the meter. One of our internal data projects that our recruits are working on is building a recruitment portal for ourselves. So currently, when people come in, they're applying on several Google Forms, for example, to be able to get into the program, which is not a smooth user journey. So we're getting some of our own recruits from within data and from web dev to build a Django-based recruitment portal where people can sign on, the data is saved, and a cloud SQL server, and then we have access to that data, which is of course very important from our side, so that we can predict at the end of the day who are the most successful alumni. I've talked earlier about the both aptitude tests and the personality characteristics that we know from research is important, but now we can collect this data over a period of time and see which indicators in fact are most important in predicting our most successful alumni within the different tracks, whether tech or creative, and what are the red flags that come up here. So recruits work on actual products that are working, and we use and have real deadlines so that they get an idea of the workplace exposure. We feel that's very important as well and sets us apart somewhere from other code camps such as We Think Code or CodeX, in the sense that they have ownership over their product. It's something that will actually be used. And we provide this agile teamwork environment so they can get an idea of what the workplace will be like, rather than just working on their own, which can be quite a change then if you go from a coding bootcamp into a workplace. There are, however, a lot of differences in taking on a non-grad that comes from a bootcamp or learnership such as ours to taking on a graduate student. Or we know that in data science, at least 60% of data scientists have masters and PhDs. There are certainly many differences. Some of those differences lie in problem-solving skills, communication skills, professional communication, both one-on-one and in terms of online digital communication, and just an interaction with peers. People come from very different environments. What's important for us on this front is managing employer partners' expectations of what they're going to get with someone with 9 months training versus 10 years at a university, and to help our recruits with these skills. So we not only offer technical skills training, but a lot of soft skills or work professionalism workshops, including negotiation, professional communication, giving and receiving feedback, also within the code review setting, public speaking. And then we provide counselors and other recreational activities on site, because we realize that a lot of our recruits come from very difficult backgrounds as well. And we need to set them up to have good communication and good skills so that they can go into the workplace. Our recruits are also much more practical focused than theoretical. And this can be good or bad, and probably speaks to the need for diversity within the workplace. They work 9 to 5 on practical problems, so realistically they actually come in with a lot more practical experience than someone who is fresh from grad school. They already know about testing and version control and can implement something. They don't necessarily have the deep theoretical background. which for junior level employees, if spaced within a supportive environment, they have room to grow. But companies need to be aware of this so that they can also manage their team and manage their expectations and know that it will not be the same type of candidate that enters if they're from when they're recruiting from postgraduate degrees, for example. Leading into that, some of the challenges that we face as well is convincing employers to employ non-grads as data scientists. Traditionally, data scientists have come from the engineering, mathematics, statistics, and computer science areas. And there's very good reason to have that mathematical background, especially at the higher levels of the organization. But I would argue that there's a lot of skills where you don't need that in-depth mathematical or engineering knowledge. There's a lot of time, as we all know, that's spent on data extraction, transformation, cleaning. And a lot of the basic model principles can be understood, and you know what to do to apply it without having a specific engineering background. So there's a lot of room for people to grow and then learn on the job to get some of those extra skills. But convincing employers is still quite tough. What is the ideal length of program to teach, and what is the ideal content to cover? And I'd like to open this up to you for discussion as well once we finish. I've given you a snapshot of the type of content that we cover, but what else should be included? What would you like to see in your junior employees? And what is a good length to train that in? We're still experimenting with it, and other people might have better answers to that. As I mentioned earlier, our recruits often come with significant psychological barriers. We have single parents, we have many people who have lost parents or come from different areas. And so for other people looking to work in this area in training kind of underserved communities, this is a real factor to consider. And I think that programs that only focus on technical skills will not succeed in the long term on that. And recruits can be quite successful in a very supportive environment of a boot camp, but might struggle considerably once placed in a workplace where there's less of a community feel, if there isn't some focus on soft skills and dealing with the emotional burdens that often come with coming from a lower resource area. We follow a mixed approach to teaching. So people watch online videos, they get assignments, and mostly they direct their learning with us reviewing their skills and offering occasional workshops, which makes it somewhat easier to scale than a completely teaching model where there's an expert teaching and others are expected to learn. But the ideal ratio of facilitators to students still needs to be seen and makes it somewhat more difficult to scale. I think a completely online environment would be much more cost-effective to bring, but won't address some of those soft skills. And finally, another challenge, especially in the newer areas like data science, is demand for it. A lot of companies doing kind of the high-skilled data science areas know what they're doing, but are particularly looking for grads with experience, or want people with experience rather than junior level employees. Companies looking to get into the data space often know that data science seems interesting, seems like the way to go, but they're not quite sure how to implement it, where their data is often, and where to start. So it's not the ideal place to place someone who's still learning if they don't have someone more senior on that. So the ideal spot would probably be somewhere in between and a team that already has support for that. just to end on one of our success stories, one of our very first data science recruits, Bukawa Moran, came in. She is a single mom, previously worked in advertising, and was just starting up her own company, taught herself web development, but was interested in getting to the data science space, and subsequently got into our program and is now employed as a junior at Wonderman, AppLogix, and is driving some of their initial data efforts there. And so, just to show that programs like this can really bring very talented and very motivated people to the fore and change people's lives quite considerably with the right recruitment and the right training with that. With that, I'm going to end. Thank you very much. If you'd like to find out more, you can find our curriculum on GitHub.
Hi, thank you very much. I think you answer a lot of the questions that I always face in my space where I'm working. But I've really got a question I want to know. Usually when the new guys start at a company, challenges that we've got, they don't understand architecture. They don't understand principles, patterns. And I think if you understand a principle and a pattern in architecture, all of the other stuff you can actually teach anybody. It's not rocket science. How do you guys cover that area?
So we have specific curriculum content on some best practices, principles of coding, design patterns. Architecture, I will admit, is one area that we're still fairly weak in, but that we want to introduce more because that has been something that's been coming from a lot of companies. Currently, the way that we do it is to make them work on real projects and involve them, for example, in setting up the architecture for a database. So to give them exposure of best practice for that, both on how to, like the theory of how to do it, but also actually doing it and making them do the work.
First of all, very great initiative. You know, I can actually appreciate in terms of like the direct gap that it targets in terms of industry. So I have like two questions. My first one is with regards to getting like corporates involved into these initiatives. What is the way in which we can get involved? And then next, in terms of, you covered a bit of the practical soft skill training. Do the learners through the learnership also go through like soft skill training to add on to the technical components you guys provide?
In terms of corporates, if you are a corporate, please get in touch with us. Anyone who's interested essentially can be involved. What we do is we approach corporates and say, this is what we have to offer people with practical experience, and how our model works is that companies pay for the learnership, and in return, they can get youth development points on the government system, and of course they got great access to young talent. So it's a way to recruit new talent. So that's in the way that we deal with that. Traditionally, a lot of our corporates have come from advertising agencies, having started on the creative sides, then also dev shops like BBD and places like Investec, Deloitte, Primedia, in terms of Primedia, for example, on the data science space, where they're interested in things around natural language processing, for example, being in the news and ad areas. In terms of soft skills development, yes, we do have workshops for those recruits then, and that either managers or some of our alumni host. And if there are particular things that you are interested in there, also please feel free to get involved.
Firstly, thanks for the wonderful talk. I think my colleague and I actually enjoyed it more from a recruitment. So we're from a corporate environment. We have challenges where we have graduates coming in and they are millennials, right? So the problem is they cannot focus on one thing. And it's constant teaching, that's one. The second is the focus is the end and not the steps to get to the end. And that's a very difficult situation because as a head of an area, I'm constantly stuck with the admin work on a psychological level, trying to guide the person. How do you actually go about managing that within your program? Because it's baby steps before you can actually be the president. And you have to achieve a few things and then get there. And we are facing this constantly year after year. And it's just the result that they are getting frustrated at the same time. And we are a productive business. So it's business as usual. We need people to come in, get into the work. You have issues, we talk about it, we solve it. Not to talk about their career development, that they want to be the CEO of the company. We need to deal with the environment at the moment. How do you go about managing that?
As a non-millennial, I hear you in that. That's certainly something that we face a lot as well. And that's one reason why we have a very curated curriculum and say, this is what you're doing this week, and this is the deadline. As an organization that does learnerships, luckily we are in the space to be able to do that. You might not have the time to manage to such an effect, but we also very much have that kid in a candy shop effect of, I want to do everything in machine learning, and I'm going to do a little bit of convolutional neural networks this week, and then I want to skip on to look at, reinforcement learning, and you actually end up doing nothing. So that's why we have a very set curriculum. People can work outside that, or bring projects that they're interested to tie up with that. But we say, okay, baby steps, you need to start with this first. This is the order that we're going to do it in. And making that clear and breaking it down for people, I think, alleviates some of the frustration. It's great that people know what they want to get. They should be wanting to be CEOs, but how to get there, and the kind of work professionalism, career development skills go in that. So besides having a very specific set of steps and say, hey, this is the order that we're going to do it in, meeting with people individually and say, where do you want to be in 10 years' time or in 5 years' time? Let's break that down to see where to start with. Because you usually, I find, have one or two sides. Either someone who's interested, but they don't have a clear plan of where they're going. So they also end up doing a little bit of everything. Or someone who has a very clear plan, but they're so eager to get there that they might skip over some of the fundamentals. And for both of those, it's quite nice to break that down. Say, okay, you want to be the CEO. For that, you're probably going to need some project management experience. You're going to need communication experience with peers, and later on with people that you're managing. For now, with seniors, you're going to need specific skills in your area. And then let's break that down further. Before you can have project management skills, you need to work on a project. So you need to know what your individual role as a worker on that project looks like, and be able to complete those within a deadline. In terms of communication, you need to be able to send a work email now, or do a code review and give good feedback, and be able to take that feedback and change your own work on that, because those communication skills will build up to that CEO level. On the technical skills area, you're interested in AI. Before that, you need to know perhaps how to code. How does Python work? So, and some good principles in that. So basic, we're starting right from the bottom, how to write a function, how to test that, how to do cross-validation, and really take it down baby steps. And then they feel that they are being heard, there is a plan to get there, and that they can get there, but what they can work on now and what the next solid step is to work on. And then that bit of a kid in a candy store effect goes away and say, okay, I don't need to do everything. Let's focus on these three areas, maybe technical skills or content within an area, communication skills, working within a team, and then build up over the years so that every year I can actually look back and say, I've met these things, I'm on my goal to become the CEO. Or these are the skills that I'm still weak in, this is what I need to work on. And I think it helps people to plan their careers, and it makes them much more motivated at the end, so it improves your retention at the end of the day. They feel that their career is growing and they're working towards something.